and today's story is a bit odd, but you might actually relate to it. Not just because it's tragic, but because it's a reminder of how easily we can forget that the internet isn't as safe as it feels. We all scroll, swipe, and talk to strangers every single day. It feels harmless, a chat here, a message there. But the truth is, every time we lower our guard, we open the door for someone who might not be what they seem. And that's exactly what happened to a young girl named Kacie Woody, whose life ended far too soon, all because she trusted the wrong person behind a keyboard. Back in 2002, Kacie was just 12, almost 13, bright, outgoing, and endlessly curious. She was the kind of girl who filled her room with laughter, music, and posters of her favorite Disney movies. She was kind, funny, and a little shy when she first met new people, the kind of person who'd stay up late giggling with friends over inside jokes. Only they understood. But her life wasn't without heartbreak. Years earlier, her family had been driving home from a baseball game on a quiet Arkansas road when tragedy struck. Two horses suddenly bolted into the street. The car hit one, and in an instant, Kacie's mother sitting in the passenger seat was gone. Her father, Rick, was devastated. But Kacie, even as a little girl, tried to be the glue that held them all together. She started doing things most kids her age didn't even think about: folding laundry, finishing her homework without being told. She was still a child, but she carried herself like someone who'd already lived a lifetime of loss. At home, it was just her dad, her older brother Tim, and Tim's college friend Eric. Rick worked nights as a police officer, which meant Kacie spent most evenings alone. It was quiet, too quiet, so she turned to the internet for company. Like a lot of teens at the time, Kacie found chat rooms, the early 2000s version of social media. She made an account under the name Model Behavior 63. The name came from her favorite Disney movie, Model Behavior, and the number 63, that was her brother's football jersey number. It was innocent, playful, and totally normal for the time. In her mind, she wasn't doing anything wrong, just finding people to talk to. She joined a Christian chat room, thinking it was a safe space, a corner of the internet full of kind, decent people who shared her faith. But anyone who remembers those early chat room days knows how deceiving they could be. Behind every friendly username could be anyone anywhere pretending to be someone they weren't. That's where she met a guy named Dave. He said he was 17. From California. Blonde hair, surfer, blue eyes. The kind of guy that sounded like he walked out of a magazine. When he sent a photo, Kacie and her friends thought he was perfect. They joked, they flirted, and soon, he wasn't just a name on her screen. He was part of her everyday routine. They started talking on the phone, too. He made her laugh, listened when she talked about missing her mom, and told her he understood what it was like to lose someone. He said his aunt, who lived in Arkansas, of all places, was sick, and he was helping take care of her. That connection made Kacie feel safe, like this was fate, somehow. But he wasn't the only person she met online. Not long after meeting Dave, Kacie also started chatting with another boy, Scott, a 14-year-old from Georgia who loved football and wrestling. He was funny, sweet, and closer to her age. Pretty soon, Kacie found herself in a middle school-level love triangle, torn between the mysterious surfer from California and the funny boy from Georgia who always made her smile. One night, Kacie decided to settle it the way every teenage girl did back then, by playing the compatibility game. She wrote down their names, crossed off matching letters, added up the points, and declared that she and Scott were meant to be. So Dave became a friend, and Scott became her boyfriend. And surprisingly, everyone knew about everyone. Scott even talked to Dave on the phone once or twice, because that's how normal it all felt. But not everyone was convinced. Scott's dad overheard one of those calls and immediately felt something was off. "This doesn't sound like a kid," he told his son. He made Scott hang up and warned him never to talk to Dave again. And when Kacie's dad found out Dave had turned 18, he gave her the same warning. "Stop talking to him. He's too old for you. You don't know who he really is." But like any 13-year-old who thinks she knows the world, Kacie didn't listen. In her eyes, her dad just didn't understand. Dave was kind. He was caring. He was safe. Or so she thought. One evening, Kacie's best friend, Jessica, was staying over. They were chatting with Dave on the phone when they heard something outside: a crunch of leaves, a crack of twigs. It was late November, the kind of night where even the slightest sound carried in the cold air. Kacie's house sat far from the main road, surrounded by quiet darkness. The lights inside made her bedroom glow like a lantern in the woods. From the outside, anyone watching could see right in. The girls froze. "Did you hear that?" Jessica whispered. The noises got louder, closer. Kacie panicked, whispering into the phone. "Dave, someone's outside." Dave told her to calm down. "There's nobody there," he said. "You're just scared because it's late." Still, she pushed her dresser in front of the door, trying to convince herself she was overreacting. Minutes passed. The sounds stopped. And eventually, they both laughed it off. Two girls spooked by their own imaginations. But what they didn't know was that their fear wasn't misplaced. Someone really was watching. Over time, Kacie's friends began to worry. Jessica didn't like talking to Dave, and her other friend Samantha thought something about him felt off too intense, too personal. They tried warning Kacie, but every time, she brushed it off. Then one day at school, everything boiled over when Samantha saw a photo taped inside Kacie's locker. "Is that Scott?" she asked. "Yeah," Kacie said proudly. "He mailed it to me." But that picture had come with a cost, because for Scott to mail it, Kacie had given him her home address. A simple argument over a misunderstood word, hot or fat, spiraled into a full-blown middle school feud. By the end of the day, everyone was taking sides, and the counselor had to get involved to calm things down. When the counselor pulled Kacie aside, she asked about her online friends. Had she ever given anyone personal information, her phone number, address, or where she went to school? Kacie smiled and lied. "No, my dad's a cop. I'm careful." The counselor reminded her to be cautious, to never meet people from the internet alone. Kacie nodded and promised to be smart. No one, not Kacie, not her counselor, not her friends, could have known how urgent that warning really was. No one could have guessed what was coming, because within 12 hours, Kacie Woody would vanish. That night, December 3rd, 2002, started like any other for Kacie. She came home, dropped her backpack, changed into pajamas, and settled into her familiar online world. Her brother Tim and his college friend Eric had gone out, one to class, the other to the library, leaving Kacie alone in the house. Her dad, Rick, was working the night shift at the police department, like usual. The house was quiet, except for the soft hum of her computer. Outside, a cold Arkansas wind swept through the trees, carrying that heavy winter stillness. Online, Kacie's boyfriend, Scott, was already waiting for her. "Hey, sweetie," he typed. "Hey," she replied. They talked like they always did, playfully, comfortably, like two kids who'd known each other forever. She told him she'd been picked to sing for the school board, and he congratulated her like any proud boyfriend would. "You're amazing," he wrote. "I told you, you've got the most beautiful voice in the world." They joked, they flirted, and in between the laughter, Kacie mentioned she was on the phone with Dave, the older guy from California. She said his aunt was really sick, probably going to pass away soon. Then, in a line that now feels haunting, she added, "She's going to meet my mommy." They talked about her mom for a bit, about how loss connects people in strange ways, and then drifted back into normal teenage chatter. But at one point, she told Scott she'd gotten a lecture earlier that day. Her counselor had warned her about strangers online, how people could pretend to be anyone, even an 80-year-old man posing as a teenager. Kacie had laughed it off. She told Scott she promised to be careful. They said, "I love you." They talked about their 2-month anniversary, and then her replies just stopped. The timestamp of her last message read 9:41 p.m. Scott kept typing, teasing her, sending hearts, saying he missed her, but she didn't answer. He waited. 10 minutes went by, then 20, then 40. At first, he thought maybe her dad came home early or her internet cut out. But when an hour went by, and the only message he got was a short, "Yeah, something felt wrong," he sent more messages. "Are you okay, baby? Sweetie, please talk to me." No answer. What Scott couldn't have known was that while he was sitting at his computer, staring at an empty chat box, something terrible had already happened. Someone had driven down the dark, isolated road to Kacie's house. It was someone who knew exactly where she lived. Someone who had been planning this for months. A little after 11:30 that night, Tim came home from class. The house was too quiet. Kacie's coat was hanging by the door, her shoes were by the couch, and the computer screen still glowed in the dark room, her chat window open. But Kacie was nowhere. He called her name, nothing. He checked the backyard, the driveway, the bathroom, still nothing. That's when he called his dad. "Dad, where's Kacie?" Rick's heart dropped. "At home," he said automatically. "No," Tim replied. "She's gone." Rick was a cop, but in that moment, he wasn't thinking like one. He was thinking like a father. He raced home, lights flashing, sirens screaming through the quiet Arkansas night. When he arrived, he knew something was terribly wrong. Her jacket was there. Her shoes were there. Her computer was still on. No sign of struggle, but everything felt wrong, like the air itself was heavy with dread. Rick called for backup. Officers fanned out through the yard, into the woods, and along the road. Every minute that passed felt like an hour. Tim and Eric searched the house again, desperate to find anything that made sense. That's when Eric noticed the computer Kacie's chat still open. The messages from Scott were still there. Lines and lines of text, pleading for her to answer. Eric typed back, pretending to be Kacie. "As soon as you see this, please reply. I need to talk to you. It's urgent." Scott responded almost instantly. They talked for several minutes, and Eric realized Scott was genuinely terrified. He told them the last time he'd heard from Kacie was 9:41 p.m., the message that just said yeah. When Eric asked if anything had seemed off, Scott said no. "She was fine," he said. "She was just talking about school." Then Eric asked about Dave. Scott hesitated, then said, "Don't worry about Dave. He's a good guy. I've talked to him. He's cool." It was the first time that name Dave hit Rick's radar. By dawn, search teams were everywhere. Neighbors woke up to flashing lights, police cars, and search dogs combing through ditches and back roads. Detectives started digging through Kacie's computer files, trying to trace who she'd been talking to. They found one username repeated over and over again: Jazzman DF. The profile said he was from San Diego. His name was listed as Dave Fagan. But the more they dug, the more things didn't add up. They checked every motel and hotel around the area, splitting the search between the north and south sides of town. And barely half an hour later, one team found something. A motel clerk said a man named Dave Fuller had checked in 2 days earlier. He'd specifically requested no maid service, not for the whole week. He'd made a fuss about the room's internet not working and asked where the nearest public library was so he could log on. Red flags everywhere. When police entered the motel room, it was spotless, almost eerily so. His bags were still packed. A pair of tan camouflage clothes lay folded neatly on the bed beside a set of rubber gloves. There were no signs of struggle, no clues about where Kacie was. Just a rented room that looked like it was waiting for someone to come back. Investigators moved quickly. They learned Dave Fuller had also rented a minivan, and the phone number listed on his rental form matched the one Kacie had called so many nights before. Now they knew for sure. Dave Fuller was Dave. The man pretending to be a teenage surfer was a 47-year-old predator. The question was, where was he now, and was Kacie still alive? The next clue came from his credit card. One charge stood out: a payment for a storage unit on the outskirts of town. The moment investigators saw it, a chill went through the room. They knew what that might mean. They just prayed they were wrong. A SWAT team surrounded the storage facility, their vehicles cutting through the early morning fog. The door to the unit was unlocked. "Police!" someone shouted. "Come out with your hands up!" Silence. Then, a single gunshot. Officers held their breath, waiting, listening. No movement, no sound. When they finally opened the unit, what they found inside would haunt them for the rest of their lives. A minivan sat backed into the storage unit. The rear seats had been removed, and in their place were chains, zip ties, duct tape, and a blanket. On one of the loose seats sat Dave Fuller, dead from a self-inflicted gunshot wound. In the back of the van was Kacie, her wrists and ankles shackled. She had been shot too. Investigators believed Fuller killed her hours earlier, likely around the same time the news broke that police had identified him. He must have realized it was over, and instead of facing justice, he took the coward's way out. The man Kacie thought was her friend, the one who comforted her, who told her he cared, was never a teenager, never from California, and never who he said he was. He was a predator who spent months studying her, grooming her, waiting for the perfect time to strike. When police searched his computer, they found evidence that Kacie wasn't his only target. He had been chatting with 3 other underage girls across the country, building trust, learning routines, waiting for opportunities. And it wasn't even his first trip to Arkansas. Records showed he'd been there twice before, once in October and again in November, scoping out her neighborhood, renting the same storage unit, and buying the same kind of minivan he'd later use to abduct her. Remember that night when Kacie and Jessica heard noises outside her window? Police believe that might have been his first attempt. Maybe he was watching. Maybe he was waiting for her to be alone but backed off because her friend was there. This time, he made sure she was by herself. When the news broke that Kacie had been found, the entire town fell silent. It was like the air got heavier, like the world itself took a breath it couldn't release. For her family, there was no preparing for that kind of loss. Rick, who had dedicated his life to protecting others, had to face the unimaginable that his own daughter had been taken right from under his nose. Her friends Jessica and Samantha were heartbroken, replaying every warning they'd ever given her, every conversation they'd ever had. They kept asking the same haunting question: what if we had done more? But no one could have known. No one could have seen the depth of evil behind that keyboard. When investigators dug into the real David Fuller, they uncovered a life that had been crumbling long before he ever met Kacie. He wasn't a teenage surfer. He wasn't 17. He was a 47-year-old man from California, a father, a husband, and a predator. His wife had just left him, taking their 2 children. There were domestic violence reports, and even an investigation after she accused him of behaving inappropriately around their young daughter. Child Protective Services had looked into it, but couldn't prove anything. That didn't mean he was innocent. Police discovered that Fuller had a history of exposing himself in public, always to young girls. When they combed through his computer and storage unit, they found more than just chat logs. There were photos, printed conversations, and detailed notes about Kacie, her schools, her friends, her family, even her father's work schedule. He had planned everything. This wasn't some random encounter. It was a calculated, methodical stalking that stretched over months, maybe longer. And the most chilling part? Kacie wasn't the only one. Investigators uncovered chat histories showing he had been grooming at least 3 other girls across different states. He had patterns, he had scripts, and he knew exactly what to say to make a lonely or curious teenager feel seen and special. This wasn't his first time pretending to be Dave, but it would be the last. Looking back, the red flags were everywhere, but they were hidden beneath the kind of charm that predators know how to weaponize. He asked endless questions, always wanting to know where Kacie was, what she was doing, when she'd be alone. He gave her comfort when she was sad. He told her she was mature, that she understood him better than people his age did. He made her feel unique, and that's exactly how grooming works. It's not just flattery. It's control disguised as affection. Even his stories were carefully crafted to mirror hers. She had lost her mother. He said his aunt was dying. She felt misunderstood. He told her his parents didn't get him either. Every lie had a purpose to make her feel like no one else could possibly understand her the way he did. And the moment she started to drift, he'd pull her back with another tragedy or crisis, always something that demanded sympathy. That's what predators do. They mirror your emotions to manipulate you. They isolate you subtly, one secret at a time, until they're the only person you feel safe confiding in. The small town of Holland, Arkansas, was shaken to its core. The idea that a man could drive hundreds of miles, rent a car, book a motel, and abduct a girl, all while posing as a harmless teenager online, shattered any illusion of safety. Parents panicked. Schools held emergency assemblies. And for weeks, the story dominated the news. Not just because of how horrifying it was, but because it was one of the first high-profile cases that showed the deadly dangers of meeting strangers online. At the time, the internet was still new. Most adults didn't even understand chat rooms. They just thought of them as harmless places for kids to talk. But this case forced everyone to see what was really happening. Predators weren't lurking in dark alleys anymore. They were in your home, behind a glowing screen. In the days that followed, Kacie's friends gathered on a porch outside one of their homes. It was cold, early December. They sat shoulder to shoulder, numb and quiet, just trying to make sense of it all. They remembered how Kacie kept saying she wanted it to snow, how she'd mentioned it so many times that week. And then, as they sat there crying, tiny flakes began to fall from the sky. For a moment, none of them spoke. They just looked up, watching the snow drift down through the darkness. It felt like Kacie was saying goodbye in the gentlest, most beautiful way she could. Kacie's dad refused to let her story end in silence. With her best friends Jessica and Sam, he created the Kacie Woody Foundation, a nonprofit dedicated to teaching families and kids about the dangers of online predators. Their mission was simple but powerful: to save children by telling Kacie's story before another one is lost the same way. They traveled to schools, churches, and community center, showing that what happened to Kacie wasn't an urban legend. It was real. It happened to a smart, kind, careful girl who did almost everything right, and still, it wasn't enough. Because being careful online doesn't mean being safe. Not when the person on the other side is lying about who they are. It's easy to think this kind of thing doesn't happen anymore, that with all the awareness, filters, and safety warnings, we're past that era. But the truth is, it happens every day. Only now, it's on different platforms, social media, gaming servers, dating apps, different usernames, same danger. Predators haven't gone away. They've just adapted. They still do the same things. They make you feel special. They rush emotional connections. They try to separate you from people who care about you. And when they finally have your trust, that's when it becomes dangerous. Even adults fall for it. Think about how many stories you've heard about people being catfished or lured into dangerous meetups through dating apps. The internet gives us access to connection, but it also gives predators access to us. That's what makes this story timeless and terrifying. Every time I revisit Kacie's case, I think about how young she was and how much life she should have had ahead of her. She'd be in her 30s now, maybe married, maybe a mom, maybe just living quietly somewhere, teaching music or helping kids the way she once wanted to. Instead, her story stands as a warning, not to scare people away from the internet, but to remind us that caution isn't paranoia, it's protection. When you meet someone online, whether it's a friend, a date, or a stranger who seems nice, ask yourself, do I really know who this person is? Or do I just know who they want me to believe they are? Because that's the difference between safety and tragedy. Every choice matters. When you hear stories like this, it's easy to sit in fear. But fear alone doesn't protect anyone. Awareness does. Talk to your kids, your siblings, your friends. Tell them that trust online has to be earned, not assumed. That no genuine connection ever needs to be hidden or rushed. That if someone makes them feel pressured, isolated, or special in secret, that's not love, that's control. If something feels off, it probably is. If a voice sounds wrong, it probably is. And if your gut says, this isn't safe, you don't need proof, you need distance. The internet can be wonderful, but it's not harmless. It's a space where empathy and exploitation exist side by side, and sometimes they even look the same. So don't stop connecting. Don't stop sharing. Just don't forget that every chat, every DM, every new friend could be anyone, anywhere. And you owe it to yourself to make sure they are who they say they are. In the end, Kacie's story isn't just about loss. It's about awareness. Because of her, schools teach digital boundaries. Because of her, parents monitor conversations and stay involved. Because of her, countless other kids have been protected. Her voice, the one that was silenced too soon, continues to speak through every warning, every foundation event, every parent who says. So if you take anything from this story, let it be this: be cautious, be curious, be safe. And because Kacie didn't get the chance to learn that lesson in time, her story still haunts many. But you can. And if you found this story difficult to hear, well, it means you cared. Share it, talk about it, teach it. Because the more we talk about these stories, the harder it becomes for predators to hide in the silence. Thank you for listening. Stay safe, stay aware, and I'll see you next time.